Detective Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a drama mystery film called The Girl on the Train. This tells the story of a broken woman's journey to find a new meaning in her life after a heartbreaking marriage, which eventually leads to her own implication in a murder. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. On a train, Rachel stares longingly at her favorite house close to her former home, and she mulls over how much she's changed over the last few months. She imagines herself as Megan, the woman living in her favorite house, living the love-filled life that Rachel desperately wants. Whenever she rides the train, Rachel tries to avoid thinking about her past with her ex-husband, Tom. Unfortunately, she fails every time, and she keeps thinking about what her life could have been if they didn't separate. Meanwhile, Megan meets with her therapist, Dr. Kamal. She reflects on her past, remembering all her experiences growing up. She says that she only feels like herself whenever she's running, and she's felt that way since she was 17. At the time, Megan was with her brother's best friend, Mac. She recalls that they lived in a cabin and that they were happy together. Just like Rachel, it's clear that Megan feels unsatisfied with her life. They both want something that's come to pass. While Rachel seems to be yearning for her life with her ex-husband, Megan would rather be running away now than anything else. Dr. Kamal curiously asks where Megan would want to go if she ran away today, but Megan ignores the question. Instead, she muses that her husband, Scott, thinks that her nannying job would make her want to get pregnant. However, Megan despises the idea of pregnancy even more. A few hours later, Megan is at the house of the woman she nannies for, Anna. While Anna plays with her baby, Evie, Megan answers the phone. However, she hears no one on the other end. Rachel's the one who called their house, and she just stays there in silence. Until now, Rachel is still shaken up over her separation from Tom. Try as she may to think of the right words to say, nothing seems to form. All she could do is think about her message for Tom. Afterwards, Megan informs Anna that she's found another job in a gallery. Anna tries asking her if she's unhappy with her current job, and Megan bluntly tells her that she'll be starting tomorrow. Annoyed, Anna asserts that she'll be busy the whole day tomorrow. After some back and forth, Megan suggests that Anna should go back to work since that would actually be better for the kid. Affronted, Anna lashes out at Megan, telling her that being a mother is hard before questioning Megan, asking her how she could ever know what it's like to be a mother. In response, Megan then walks out, leaving Anna despite her pleas for Megan to stay. Megan's distaste towards the idea of motherhood's palpable. It's evident that she just took on this job to appease her husband since he believes that it'll give her a baby fever. But it didn't work, it never did, and Megan would even shower whenever she got home to wash the baby smell off her. And now, with how unhappy Megan is in her job, she bounced as soon as she got the opportunity to. Later that night, Anna dreams of the time when Rachel took her baby. Distraught, she wakes up and finds her husband, Tom, arriving home. When Anna says that he has to tell Rachel to stop calling them and texting him, Tom assures her he'll take care of everything. In the middle of the night, a drunk Rachel tries calling Tom again, but Anna drops the call. With her constant efforts to speak with Tom to clarify things with him, Rachel's desperation for closure has clearly blocked everything in her life. Her failed marriage really hit her hard and led her to her lowest point. At this point, she sees herself as a lesser person, ultimately diminishing every sense of self-respect she could possibly have for herself. The next day, Rachel is on the train as she passes by her favorite house again, shocked to find Megan kissing Dr. Kamal. Later, in a park, Rachel continues to drink. She painfully recalls catching Tom cheating on her with Anna. She then heads to a bar and later moves to a bathroom. Inside, Rachel takes a video of herself angrily screaming that she wants to smash Megan's head. After her tirade, Rachel rides the train again. She continues imagining Megan's affair before dropping off at her station. As she walks outside, she notices a suited man constantly following her, so she quickly moves away from the man. While walking along, she seemingly finds Anna walking to a bridge. Rachel angrily screams at her, and she slanders the woman before blacking out. Rachel's pent-up aggression reaches a spike when she saw Anna, the very person who stole Tom away from her. While her anger is obviously justified, Rachel's rash moves eventually catch up to her as she slowly falls into a spiral that will eventually change her life. The next day, a bloody Rachel wakes up in her friend, Kathy's home. She turns on her phone to find a message from Tom, telling her that she scared Anna and that she should stay away from his family. Afterwards, Rachel is cleaning the blood from her face when Kathy knocks at her door, demanding her to open it. Rachel tells Kathy to go away before checking her phone again, finding her videos from the previous night. Later that day, Rachel takes the train to meet with a rehab group. Terrifying thoughts of hurting Anna fill her mind, and this only frightens her. In the support group, Rachel shares that it's day one of sobriety for her before talking about how her husband used to tell her what she did whenever she'd black out. She learned that when you wake up like that, you just apologize for what you did and for who you are and promise that you'll never do it again. But Rachel kept doing it again. Lost, Rachel laments that there's time missing and that she needs to remember. Even after her heartfelt sharing, Rachel still seems lost and confused about the direction of her life, and it really seems like rehab groups don't have much of an effect on her. While it may have cleared her head for a bit, things are still foggy for Rachel as time passes on. It's also apparent that Rachel has a pattern of this destructive behavior, especially since she mentioned that her husband used to help her with it. After her meeting, Rachel takes the train again where she overhears some gossiping women. Rachel recognizes Tom's friend, Martha, among the women and starts recalling a barbecue Martha hosted. There, Rachel lashed out at Martha, and the day ended with her engaging Tom in a violent tirade. With how Tom keeps looking like the most understanding husband in the world, Rachel seems very lucky. Tom passes off as the good guy in his marriage who's burdened with caring for an erratic and alcoholic wife. However, if someone looks too good to be true, they usually are. When Rachel arrives home, she's surprised to find detectives, Riley and Gaskell, there waiting for her. Detective Riley sits Rachel down and begins to interrogate her, asking of her whereabouts last Friday night. Rachel nervously lies about being at work, but Detective Riley grills in on her, informing her that Megan has gone missing. This shocks Rachel, and despite her attempts at reasoning with them, the detectives have gotten enough information, so they leave. Kathy then confronts Rachel to ask her about what she's been doing the past year. Rachel tells her that she only rides the train to New York and back, weirding Kathy out. With Kathy going on about a murder that happened in Long Island, Rachel starts zoning out, and she remembers Megan's affair again. Rachel rushes outside to Detective Riley to tell her about Megan's affair, but Detective Riley strongly doubts her. She mentions that the neighbors saw a drunk woman by Megan's house, surprising Rachel again. Detective Riley then warns her to stay away from Tom's family before leaving. With the detectives questioning her and her actions, Rachel can feel the full toll that her alcoholism has on her. While it's natural to be confused, it's hard to tell whether she's telling the truth or not. After all, Rachel's actions when she's drunk are questionable, to say the least. 4 months ago, Megan visited Dr. Kamal again. She talked about how she always lies to everyone to keep things vague in her life. She also tried alluring Dr. Kamal with her body, all while speaking in a provocative manner, but he ignored her efforts. The topic shifted to Scott's possessiveness over her and how he liked to own her, and Dr. Kamal cut her off to say that his behavior is toxic. After claiming that she didn't mind his obsession with her, Megan started telling the doctor that she thought about him all the time. While she's obviously in love with Scott, Megan seemed like the kind of woman who liked sleeping around. This only highlights her desire to run away, as different men can almost feel like some sort of escapism. Despite Dr. Kamal's attempts at remaining professional, Megan's a completely attractive woman who can easily sway any man to her whims. Back to the present, Rachel reads about Megan and looks at the reports of her disappearance. She later visits Scott to tell him of Megan's affair. Of course, Rachel empathizes with him as she explains how it happened. This has Scott going for a beer, and he gives one to Rachel before saying that it may be a good thing that Megan left with someone else. Just as Rachel's about to leave, Scott stops her and shows a picture of Dr. Kamal. Rachel confirms that he's the one she saw Megan with. After meeting with Scott, Rachel's slowly finding meaning in her life again. With her newfound mission to uncover what happened to Megan, she now has something to take her mind off her ruined marriage. While she isn't sure how deep she can go into this, she intends to go all in and starts investing all of her time towards Megan's case. 2 months ago, Megan was waiting inside a lodge. She was calling someone and asking where he is before hooking up with the man outside. Returning home, Megan found a furious Scott waiting for her, and she told him to stay away from her. She left then met with Dr. Kamal to vent about Scott. Megan tried hooking up with him, only for Dr. Kamal to aggressively resist her. Try as Dr. Kamal made to stop her advances, Megan still got inside his head, and the two started forming a relationship that overstepped any professional boundary. This almost paints Dr. Kamal in a questionable light as far as Megan's disappearance goes. He could very well lose his license for getting with his patient, even if everything was Megan's doing. She's a tenacious woman, and she clearly has a way of getting what she wants. Back to the present, Rachel watches TV as Dr. Kamal is arrested for Megan's disappearance. After prematurely celebrating, she heads over to Scott's house. To her surprise, Scott informs her that Dr. Kamal's been released due to insufficient evidence. Now, the police seem to suspect Scott for Megan's disappearance. He nervously moves away, fearing that the police will soon arrest him. Rachel tries reassuring him, saying that they should find more evidence, but Scott hopelessly tells her that he couldn't find any evidence in Megan's things. Scott then answers a phone call and orders Rachel to leave. Scott's suspicions about Rachel's credibility start to show after hearing the news. However, Rachel still tries to handle the situation, desperately clinging on to the hope that she's finally found meaning in life again. With no other choice, Rachel walks out, and in the streets, she suddenly sees Tom and Anna's family. Upon seeing Rachel, Tom immediately approaches her. As Tom does, Rachel suddenly recalls seeing Anna on the night Megan disappeared. Rachel tells Tom that Anna hit her before getting inside Tom's car. Tom denies this and asserts that his wife is scared of her, surprising Rachel. Incredulous about Rachel's reaction, Tom brings up the child abduction case, and Rachel immediately dismisses this as a lie. Rachel insists that he knows that's not how it happened, but Tom simply answers that they both know what she's capable of. Bit by bit, all the pieces are looking questionable. Earlier, Anna gave the impression that Rachel's completely unhinged that she took her baby. But now, Rachel's claiming that things didn't happen that way. It also seemed that Anna was completely defenseless against Rachel's drunken tirades, but now, Rachel is implying that Anna's the reason why she woke up all bloody. Later, Rachel goes to Dr. Kamal and asks him to help her recover lost memories. Rachel explains to him how she's been feeling, and Dr. Kamal precisely understands Rachel. He even points out her drinking problems, then asks about the root of them. Rachel tearfully explains that it started when she had trouble having a child with Tom and that it only got worse when her drinking started. With Dr. Kamal calmly listening, Rachel gloomily continues about how she's changed after seeing a couple's perfect love broken by betrayal. Though her meeting with Dr. Kamal definitely helped Rachel address some of her suppressed emotions about her past, she still has an underlying reason behind her visit to the doctor. Ultimately, Rachel has her sights set on one goal, and that goal is to find any information regarding Megan. Meanwhile, Anna meets with Detective Riley to report Rachel's continuous efforts to call them. However, the detective dismisses her and explains that they would need hard evidence to convict Rachel of anything. Anna tries to push for the case, but Detective Riley mentions that Tom might want to maintain his connection with Rachel. Flustered, Anna is filled with doubt as she heads home. In their house, Anna tries logging into Tom's computer using Rachel's name as the password, but to her relief, it doesn't work. That night, Scott visits Rachel in her home. Heartbroken, he reveals that the detectives told him that Megan was pregnant and that she told her shrink but not him. Scott recounts that Megan was always against the idea of having kids with him. When he asks Rachel if Megan ever said anything to her about him, Rachel assures him that Megan loved him in ways that people only dream of being loved. Afterwards, Rachel lets Scott stay for the night, carefully staring at him as he sleeps. For some reason, Rachel stares at Scott with a weirdly loving look. It's almost as if she was falling for him as they work together. This is misguided, of course. Rachel is a broken-up woman, Scott is a broken-up man, and they only ever meet each other to talk about Megan. A month ago, while Scott was asleep, a teary-eyed Megan got up and left for Dr. Kamal's house. When she arrived, Megan dismally told him how she had a daughter with Mac when she was 17 and that she was only able to raise her child thanks to her love for her. She then recalled the day Mac left her, leaving her in the lodge as it rained. Mac left after a fight, and it was freezing. She stayed in a tub and held Elizabeth in her arms until she accidentally fell asleep. When she woke up, her heart stopped after seeing Elizabeth in the water, lifeless. After telling her story, Megan ran to Dr. Kamal, and he embraces her, comforting her for her loss. Now, it's clearer why Megan seems so jaded by pregnancy and motherhood in general. She's always been a deeply unhappy person, always chasing after her next thrill since she lost her true happiness in that lodge. She must have taken the death of her baby badly, and perhaps after all this time, she still blamed herself for it. Back in the current time, Rachel meets with Dr. Kamal again and tells him of the time when she once returned to her old home with Tom. After walking inside, she immediately went to Evie and took her, carrying her as if she was her own child. She then walked outside, still carrying Evie, and noticed Megan peeking at her from a fence. Anna suddenly ran out and worriedly asked Rachel what she was doing before Rachel gently placed Evie down, running away from the house. After her session with Dr. Kamal, Rachel takes the train home and the news breaks out that Megan's body was found. Now, the police are calling it a homicide. She then heads to Scott's place, finding him swarmed by reporters. There, she also sees Anna walk outside with her baby. After Rachel walks past her, Anna returns home and blankly lies in bed with Tom, who asks if she's okay. She ignores him as she watches Tom change into his clothes, coldly telling him that she misses being Tom's mistress. Irritated, Tom tells her to not fixate on Rachel, but Anna continues, telling him that she saw Rachel today near Scott's house. Anna then lies about Rachel, falsely telling him that Rachel was aggressive before suggesting that Rachel might have killed Megan. Tom defends Rachel, insisting that she's just lonely and harmless. Unsatisfied, Anna remains silent as she watches Tom leave the room. Strangely enough, Tom strongly defends Rachel despite constantly ignoring her and pushing her away. This is Anna receiving a taste of her own medicine. She used to be the secret that Tom kept, and now, she's left with the feeling that she's in the same situation that Rachel was in. Loyalties aside, it's still strange that Tom is insisting that Rachel's harmless. Meanwhile, Rachel arrives home and is surprised to find Scott inside. He invites her over for some beer and tells Rachel that neither he nor Dr. Kamal is the father of Megan's baby. He asks Rachel if Megan ever mentioned a third man, and with Rachel anxiously remaining silent, Scott furiously orders her to take a seat. Rachel tries calming him down, but Scott continues, forcing Rachel to admit that she never even met Megan. Scott then lashes out at Rachel, throwing his bottle as he confronts her about how the cops think that they're in a relationship and that she's a crazy liar. Rachel tries reasoning with him, but Scott angrily ignores her and asks about her sessions with Dr. Kamal. Rachel desperately explains that she went to the doctor to try to help Scott, but he's had enough of her. He grabs her head and covers her mouth as he claims that all of them are liars before storming out of her house. With Scott facing betrayal after betrayal, it's no wonder that he's exploded. The poor man can't catch a break, and while Rachel doesn't necessarily have bad intentions going in, discovering that she's been lying to him is a big slap on the face, especially after Megan's done her own share of incessant lying. Later that day, Rachel tries to file a complaint against Scott before Detective Riley arrives. She takes Rachel into the bathroom to talk. There, she immediately accuses Rachel of being a suspect who's trying to work with Scott and Dr. Kamal to avoid arrest. Angered, Rachel defends herself, saying that she only wanted to help them before accusing Scott of murdering Megan. Detective Riley ignores Rachel's pleas and instead, she calmly asks her if she killed Megan. She even reassures Rachel that she'd be safe if she admits to it. Speechless, Rachel walks out on the detective. Rachel's supposed new meaning in life slowly starts crumbling down as she starts feeling more hopeless about Megan's case. More than that, it's the very thing that's incriminating her right now. In spite of this, Rachel desperately pushes through her struggles and tries her best to fully see this through. Last Friday, Megan sat by her toilet, heartbroken when she discovered that she's pregnant. She then called Dr. Kamal to ask if he could come over. The next day, Dr. Kamal arrived and comforted her, telling her that she isn't alone. The two started kissing and hugging as Rachel spotted them from the train. Presently, Rachel sits by a bar and finds the suited man from the day Megan went missing. Rachel confronts the man, demanding him to tell her what happened that day, but the man hastily tells her that she was drunk and alone. Disgusted, the man leaves Rachel to doubt herself, with tears slowly falling from her eyes. After this, Rachel arrives home and listens to her video from the night of Megan's disappearance. As she listens, Rachel regretfully starts believing that she might have killed Megan. Rachel then writes a letter to Kathy, thanking her for allowing her to stay in her house before leaving. Now on the train, Rachel spots Martha again and apologizes to her for what happened in the barbecue back then. Confused, Martha reveals that Rachel never caused her any trouble back then. On the day of her barbecue, Martha took her to the guest bedroom to rest. With Rachel being so convinced that she's always the bad guy, this sends her into a shock. Now, Rachel's finally starting to remember that it was Tom who had the violent outburst, not her. Martha knowingly adds that Tom had always been a bad guy who could never keep it in his pants. Rachel then leaves, realizing now that Tom's been lying the whole time. As it turned out, Rachel wasn't a violent drunk. Tom fabricated those stories. Since he's the one who'd tell her about what happened each time she blacked out, since he's the one who made her apologize and berated her for never being anything more than sorry, Rachel never had anything else to believe in. That's why it's so easy for her to believe that she's a horrible person who's capable of doing such evil things when drunk. Tom had used Rachel's weakness against her, all while keeping his image squeaky clean. Back at Tom's home, Anna is checking on Tom's other phone. When she opens it, Anna learns of Tom's affair. She cycles through his messages before quickly hiding the phone when Tom arrives. Later that night, Anna sneaks out of bed and gets Tom's phone again to go outside and listen to the voicemails on the phone. Through these, it's revealed that Tom's been having an affair with Megan. When she hears Tom coming, she immediately throws the phone away before Tom tells her to go back to bed. Tom's true self is slowly being revealed as his current wife also discovers his disgusting ways. However, unlike Rachel, Anna tries denying this and merely obeys Tom for now, staying under his authority. This begs the question, though, does Tom have anything to do with Megan's death? Meanwhile, Rachel runs along the streets, slowly recalling her memories from the day she blacked out. When she reaches the tunnel, Rachel remembers everything. Megan was going to Tom, and when she told him that Rachel was there, Tom immediately stormed towards Rachel. He set her to the side then hit her on the head. With Rachel crawling to the middle of the street, she watched Tom speed away with Megan. After her revelation, Rachel sits by the tunnel, slowly digesting everything that's happened. The next day, Rachel goes to Anna and asks her about Tom. Anna reluctantly tells her that she's already aware of Tom's lies, but Rachel tries to convince her that Tom is dangerous and that he killed Megan. Anna denies this before Tom peeks through the door, telling Anna to get inside. Rachel then fearlessly curses at Tom, even calling him a murderer. Angered by this, Tom pulls Rachel inside as she continues to tell Anna about the day Megan disappeared, claiming that Tom had Megan in the car. Despite Tom's denials, Anna is slowly coming to her senses, and she claims to have found the phone he used to call Megan. And now, Tom is unraveling before the two women who once thought the world of him. Especially Rachel, who thought him to be the thread who held her together and made her life less listless. But the jig is up now, and with Anna and Rachel catching on to him, the desperation fills Tom, and this makes him think rashly. Ignoring the two women, Tom goes to Evie and carries her. This alarms Anna as she tries to take Evie away from Tom. In the end, he gives Evie back to Anna while Rachel dials for the police. Noticing this, Tom takes Rachel's phone away from her before grabbing her by the head and sitting her down in the kitchen. Tom then calms down and tells Rachel that she needs a drink, then gives her a glass of alcohol. Rachel ignores this as she begins telling Tom how evil he is with how he's been lying to her all this time. Disgusted, Tom angrily stares at Rachel before knocking her out with a glass. Returning to the day of Megan's disappearance, it's revealed that Tom took Megan out to the woods. Thinking that Megan wanted to hook up, Tom tried setting her up by a tree. But instead, Megan told him that she's pregnant. Surprised, Tom sarcastically congratulated her, but Megan tried telling him that he might be the father. Starting to get angry, Tom told her that she could easily get rid of the baby, but this disgusted Megan. She lashed out at Tom before insulting him and pushing him away. Angered, Tom pushed Megan back, making her head hit a rock. In defiance, Megan insulted Tom again, telling him that he can never get rid of her. To this, Tom kicked her in the face, which briefly knocked her out. He then pulled her to the side and finished her off by repeatedly hitting her head with a rock. People make lapses in judgments all the time, and nobody can be expected to be an upstanding individual at every waking hour. But Tom, he's a monster. Not only is he a serial cheater and a violent gaslighter, he's also a murderer. He should have known what he was getting into when he slept around, and nothing should have warranted Megan's untimely death. And all this time, everyone was getting blamed for his crime while he stayed the innocent one in all this. When Rachel wakes up, Tom heartlessly blames her for Megan's death. Of course, she denies this and puts the blame on him before running away. She grabs a wine opener as she heads to the door. With Tom chasing her, he manages to grab her neck. He pins Rachel to the ground while Anna helplessly watches from upstairs. Rachel then grabs an umbrella stand and hits Tom with it, allowing her to escape to the backyard. Tom runs after her again, catching up to her, only for Rachel to stab his neck with the wine opener. After this, Rachel shakes, staring at the train while Anna slowly walks to Tom's body. Rachel watches as Anna coldly twists the wine opener deeper into Tom's neck, finally ending him. The two women then stare at each other blankly before the police arrive, taking the women with them to the station. From there, Rachel and Anna tell the police what happened, relaying everything to Detective Riley. A few days later, Rachel visits Megan's grave before going to the park, reflecting on the horror she shared with Anna and Megan. She then rides the train again, now ignoring Tom's house as she leaves her past behind. With how Rachel quietly leaves on the train again, it's clear how she has finally disposed of her demons. At the start, She was a deeply broken woman who was hopeless and without any direction after going through a painful separation with Tom because of an affair he had. She was basically nothing and was left with no other option but to plot her own destruction as she drowned in a never-ending sea of alcohol and sadness. However, albeit through an extremely unfortunate event, Rachel ironically found meaning in her life again after catching another affair. This discovery eventually led her to really pull all of her strength into seeing it through as she perseveringly fought to find the truth until the very end. Even if it meant rewriting everything she knew and shattering the image of what she thought to be the better days of her life. While Rachel's story was indeed one filled with struggle and challenges, it just goes to show how the truth will always prevail in the end. Thanks to Rachel and a bit of help from Anna, Megan's death was eventually given justice. Through this, they had ended Tom's tyranny as a man taking advantage of numerous women. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.